Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Because Football podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Bagley, and very excited today to have a conversation around storytelling, around what the game of soccer means to people on a cultural community level. And we're going to be talking generally in terms of America as we lead into the World Cup. I want to welcome Shawn Francis. Shawn is an experienced creative executive and brand storyteller. He's followed his passion from the music business, working with MTV to MLS and laying social media foundations for both brands. Currently executive creative director of North America for COPA90. Shawn has more than 15 years experience. He's carved out a lane creating culture-driven content for globally recognized brands within sports. And we're going to talk specifically about American soccer culture today and this amazing opportunity we've got in 2026 as the World Cup comes. So first, Shawn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here, man. And I know a lot of our listeners will know of COPA90, will know some of your work in the past with MLS and the variety of agencies and brands that you've worked with. But I want to kind of go, as we do with a lot of our guests, let's go to kind of like step one, day one, first memory. What's that earliest memory of the game that you can kind of connect to this like obsession that now has been such a big part of your life?
Yeah, I think like a lot of folks in America who are into soccer, my first memories are of playing it, not watching it. Grew up at a time pre-MLS, post NASL, where we're kind of a little bit of a void for soccer in this country. But the youth game was there. It wasn't the behemoth of
Mm-hmm.
club teams and private trainers and all of this sort of American youth soccer industrial complex, as I
Yep.
like to call
Know it
it.
well.
But it was an era where, your local boys club would have a team, something like that. And it was fun, man. It was one of those things where it was the first sport I ever played, you know. Like I say, I grew up down south, so you played Texas, you played football in Texas, right? Like American football was almost the law, at that
Mm.
point. Before I got into that, I played soccer and did that for about 3 years and really loved it. It was the first time I ever felt like, I was one of the gang, one of the boys,
Mm.
like I was first time being on a team and knowing what that's like to have teammates and to kind of play for each other and kind of be part of a group. And I think for a lot of youth, that's an important feeling, right? Yeah, and that was kind of the roots of it for me. But then I put it down for quite a while. I think by age 10, I was done playing soccer,
It was
and
like into football. Was that kind of like that's like the Texas thing? You're like,
yeah,
all right, you can play soccer to get you to run around, but then, let's be real here. It's going to be football or, maybe a baseball, whatever it is, that more traditional Americana.
yeah, it was a bit of that. It was also a bit of I was in a small town that like at that in that era. This is like in the late '80s. Like there was no weren't really options for soccer. It wasn't in the schools. And there was no travel teams around. But really put it down for a while. And the '94 World Cup came around and kind of reminded me that soccer existed. And I just got sucked in from there. And, you know, that kind of piqued my interest back. But still, you know, there was no soccer on TV,
Hmm.
at that time, really, in America. There really wasn't, at least if you didn't speak Spanish, it wasn't on. And I think even that was probably limited to one Spanish language channel in the area I grew up in. But then when MLS came around in '96, then it was like, okay, I had some place to channel this
Hmm.
this this curiosity,
Hmm.
which turned into energy, which turned into a career, luckily for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll talk more about, that the impact of a tournament like the World Cup, especially being hosted in the US, right? With 94 having that impact and that's a big part of a lot of people's stories. As you mentioned, this has become a career for you, right? Over time, you've been fortunate to kind of carve this lane within the game like so many of our guests have and many of our listeners have or want to be able to bring that to fruition. But how have you seen you kind of hinted at a little bit early on, there was nothing on TV. Then more of your career coincides with the growth of social media era and that ability to have these other outlets for storytelling. What are some big things, the most obvious things that stick out of like, hey, then versus now? What kind of situation are we in? What changes have you seen?
Biggest thing I think is accessibility. I mean, you don't have to go back that far. You can go back. Oh man, I mean, I started working in MLS. What season was that? 2009 season, right? So it's like, a year or two after Beckham lands here, right? But if you go to a year or two before Beckham lands here, so go to like 2005. I think about that, like trying to find, the stories of what your team did in the game last night, or what's going on with the local supporters group. Like, it was a little bit of a hunt. It was message boards, it was blogs, and then there'd be like the local beat writer for whatever your city's newspaper was, and that's like 2005. Go 5 years before that, go 2000, 2001, like finding
Hmm.
out the local score even for an MLS team was like a wild goose chase.
Yeah.
Like there was just no accessibility. That's if you're just talking about the domestic game, right? If you're trying to figure out what Brighton and Hove Albion did, an
Hmm.
ocean away,
Hmm.
like forget about it, right? You just really
Yeah.
had to like know exactly where to go, to find that sort of thing. But I think now the accessibility is just, it's incredible. I mean, not only can you watch pretty much any team in any league
Hmm.
anywhere in the world, but you can also not only follow them on social media, and so you can get these sort of daily updates of what's going on with this club directly from the club. Furthermore, every club's got its own sort of micro community, right,
Exactly.
of Brighton and Hove Albion supporters, and then you could break that down even further into local support. I always laugh. There's a house probably 3-4 blocks from me. I'll notice on a Saturday they'll hang up a New Jersey Swans flag on their
Mm.
porch, and they're Swansea supporters. I don't know who lives there or whatever,
Okay.
but it just
Okay.
it kind of blows my mind now, right? That you've got like this niche, local supporters club for a team in Wales. And who knows? Maybe the person that lives there is from Wales. They've brought this love of their club and the game with them, but there's a good chance they didn't. Because we
Hmm.
just are on this point in this country now where soccer has become, just this thing that it's just permeated every platform there is. I think it's just due to this accessibility. Back in the day, there was a blog called Du Nord, and this guy, Bruce McGuire, used to run it. And he had this quote where he called, soccer was the sport of the internet. In America, soccer is the sport of the internet. And
Hmm.
it was so true because, like,
Hmm.
if you were a fan of the NFL or NBA, NHL, pick your game, pick your lane. You could turn on Sports Center, sports radio, pick up the newspaper
It
or your
was there
newspaper's
for
website.
you.
Where,
Yeah.
yeah, it was there for you. But like, soccer, if you weren't online, you had no idea what was going on.
That you're painting that image of the internet. I'm thinking of that. You mentioned the 2000s to probably for me it was like the 2005 6. Going to Barnes and Noble and trying to pick through into like the 442 magazines when Saturday comes. That was big for me, and they
Yeah.
didn't even have like very robust online presences at that point. But yeah, it's amazing to see like the internet has changed. And you talk about these niche communities, whether it's the Swansea supporter or like for myself, I support Port Vale in League One. And like every week, I'm reading a newsletter from a local reporter. I'm listening to the fan led podcast. I'm able to watch games on their streaming service every week. We have a WhatsApp group now of like a dozen of us North America based fans. And it's just that technology that has allowed that. Because without it, you know, there's definitely no way you're getting any of that information, even like you said, to the Premier League level. Was you had to dig through like the high school sports scores in your local newspaper, and maybe you would find something. So it's incredible to see that change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, that's kind of what made me fall in love with it, right? The word culture gets thrown around so much
Hmm.
and has different meanings for different people, but for me, it was that was part of the culture around soccer. I was and still am a big music person, and I was always kind of drawn to the things that were a little bit left of center, you know. And if I put it in music terms, the other sports in America were top 40,
Hmm.
the NFL, the NBA are top 40, right? Soccer was always that thing that was like the next layer, a little bit more underground. It
Yeah,
was almost like the indie band of sports,
100%.
and what you're talking about is a great analogy, man, of the sort of like, um going to Barnes and Noble and thumbing through 442 and those magazines was the same thing as going to a record store and thumbing through the vinyl and thumbing through the CDs looking for the weird import 12-inch remix of
Yeah,
whatever song,
yeah.
but it's
Those
always
hidden
had that.
gems.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's always had this kind of a little bit of a sort of an underground appeal for me, at least. I think for a lot of people, it is. You know, it's sort of like I like to say it's this team sport for people who don't like team sports.
That's a great way to put it. I think that kind of connects to a thought I've been having a lot, specifically in an American context of like the game in general just appealing to a lot of people that maybe aren't as drawn to other sports potentially for whatever reasons. Maybe it is a more communal side, the fan aspect. But as we've seen this game shift so much and it's changed from, that little gem you might find in the corner of the record store to like now everybody and their mom kind of knows of a Ted Lasso or has seen Welcome to Wrexham. If somebody told you
Yeah,
25 years ago, this is where we'd be.
yeah,
How do you feel then from that? Does that change that feeling of this is kind of like almost your little, my precious kind of thing, right? To make the Lord of the
a
Rings
little
like
bit.
a connection. And now it's like where we're going, because I have mixed feelings about it too.
Yeah, sure, a little bit. I think, it reminds me a little bit of being in high school and Nirvana breaking, to use another music analogy, right? Like suddenly when like Nirvana comes out and like every guy in school who used to want to beat you up and make fun of you for what you wore was suddenly asking you, "Hey, where do you buy your flannels?" It's like your secret gets out there, and suddenly you go from being a little bit of a weirdo and an outcast to,
Hmm.
oh, you went from being on the margins to, oh, this person's actually on the cutting edge. They actually know what's up well before I did. So that's always a little weird thing. But at the end of the day, like it doesn't change the game. It doesn't change the
Hmm.
music, right? There's always this weird thing in music where people are like, there's a band that's a critical darling, but suddenly they become successful and everyone starts to hate on them. Doesn't change the album at all. The album is the same album that you loved 6 months ago. Now it's just everyone else loves it. So it's more of a personal thing of like, because there are some people who are into soccer because they think they want the culture to be theirs and theirs alone and they want to feel ownership of it. But you can have ownership and still share it, right? You don't have to sort of gatekeep and you don't have to feel like, oh, well,
Right.
I'm on the inside, you're on the outside, so you stay outside. I think it's one of those things that like, you know, embrace it, quite frankly, because if you've been around a long time like me, I guess if I can remember 20 years ago what it was like, you kind of
Hmm.
need to embrace it because it's like this right now, what we're living in, is a little bit of a fantasy, it's a little
Yeah.
bit of you know, I think about going to MLS games in like, you know, 2000, 2001 when I first moved to New York and like, you know, it was, the league was on the verge of collapse, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Exactly. I was just going
You
to say
think
that
about
time.
what soccer in America was at that point versus now. It's like, I don't know. I think the sort of being too cool for school thing of like, oh, it's so mainstream now. It's a little bit short-sighted, you know?
And if that is your predisposition, like the great thing about this game is that it is so massive that you can find your little corner. Like I keep saying, you build your own, right? If you're not happy with it, like do it in your own way in some way, right? Whether it's playing or as a fan, whatever it is. It's just yeah, it's
Sure.
incredible to see, with that. I think similar to that is like I want to get before we get into kind of COPA90 and the best job in the world project and go deeper in this culture conversation. We do have the World Cup coming. And a lot of your career has been on the digital side of things, digital storytelling, social media. But looking through your background, there's also been a lot of in-person activations and events, like taking this fervor we've felt on the internet into real life. So,
Hmm.
and with the World Cup, there's definitely the internet aspect to that, but also it's probably the best example we have of experiencing things together with people in ways that we treasure, in ways that we maybe don't expect how that's going to happen, how everybody expresses that, the global diverse nature of the tournament, and especially in arguably the most diverse country in the world. It's like perfectly suited for that. But I want to talk a little bit about like when you look around and see opportunities for different types of events and bringing people together in person. What are some things that kind of excite you? What are some things maybe that people are overlooking that they can try in their own backyard, in their community to leverage that World Cup energy without necessarily having to fork over an unbelievable amount of money at this point for a ticket to like be in the stadium?
Yeah, yeah. I think the key is that word you used, community, right? And finding like-minded individuals to kind of band your resources together and do something big. Because it doesn't take much, I live about an hour south of New York City, down the Jersey Shore. The things that happen, things that are just what we would call Tuesday in Manhattan or Brooklyn, never happen an hour away in the burbs. like absolutely never happen. So simple things like a World Cup watch party, if you can do that on a local level, getting maybe three people together, you've got the idea, one person who manages a bar or a restaurant, and one other person who is a DJ, and one other person who, in my case, plays in bands. You can pull those four people together and say, hey, let's do something around the World Cup. And I did this a few years ago here at the beach. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I had this idea. Friend had this bar that they manage up on the beach. I knew a bunch of guys in bands. I said, hey, if we can pull together, a small amount of money to just do some simple stuff, pay the bands, um, and to bring in like, we're gonna pay like a food truck to be there every day. We can do a World Cup clubhouse, every weekend for the next 5 weeks. And it was great because it's like none of us could have done it on our own. And it probably wouldn't have worked if we'd done it on our own. But it was like, okay, I got the idea. We're gonna put it in this guy's space. This guy's gonna his band's gonna play, and he's gonna book all these other bands. So we have a new band every day and a DJ afterwards every day. And then in between we play the games. And it was one of those things where, just by using um, what we all had at our disposal and bringing it all together, we created this really fun summer moment that, it's great. It's one of those things where did we change the world? No, but people in our community still talk
Hmm.
about it. I still run into
Hmm.
people, and this was 2018 World Cup. I'll still run into people like probably every 3 or 4 months. Someone's like, oh man, that clubhouse thing on the beach, that was great. It's just one of those things where, like, again, I think community is just the key to it all. We can, because soccer has reached a level where it's not just, it's not a niche thing anymore because it is so mainstream. You can find people in your community. And it doesn't matter if you're in Manhattan, New York or Manhattan, Kansas. You can find three or four people who are interested and like-minded and bring your resources together to make something that really just, resonates locally and works in your community.
So what I'm hearing from that then to everybody listening is like some element of the passion for the game, getting a couple people for that have some relative skills that make it a great environment. You had the music, the food, and then they just bring in their own networks too. It's great because these are things I'm thinking about too, and I'm sure a lot of people are in their own local soccer space of how do we make the World Cup feel alive and make it feel like ours, during this very special time.
But yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, just to put a pin in a bow on that, this is a massive sports moment. This is a massive country. The World Cup's only going to be in a few cities. Even though it's double digits, it's still only a few cities relative to the size of this country. I would encourage anyone out there who is like, I'm priced out of this or I'm geographically locked out of this, to get together with their friends and figure out, hey, how can we bring this moment to Duluth, Minnesota? How can we bring this moment to Albuquerque, New Mexico? Because make no mistake, there are passionate communities there that want to have that moment, even though they're not in the stadium. I've never been to a World Cup. But when I talk to people who go, they all tell me the same thing. Like, the games are great, but most of the stories they tell me when they come back from Brazil, from Germany, from South Africa, from South Korea
Mm-hmm.
are the things that happened off the field and the people they
Absolutely.
met, the dinners they went out to. They got on the wrong train, but ended up partying with these guys from Austria till 3 in the morning. It's like all those things can still happen. The best moments can still happen even without the actual game
No,
or
agreed.
attending
That's
the
been
actual game.
Yeah, yeah. That's so often been my experience too. I've been fortunate to travel around. I think we share that interest as well, and we're going to talk about that too. Is like it's the games are like the reason for everything, but then it's really everything around it that we really can take ownership of and feel a part of and create those stories and moments. Let's pivot to your career here again in this role now you've got with COPA90. Could you just give for the listeners who might be, different levels of let's say, awareness of what COPA90 has offered within the soccer culture and community? What do you guys do, and what attracted you to join COPA90 as well within this role?
Yeah, certainly. And your last little statement there before pivoting was way too perfect, by the way, because our whole thing at Cobra 90 is, the story outside the 90 minutes, right? Everything that goes on around outside the 90 minutes makes that 90 minutes mean more. Um, when Copa 90 was founded, they realized very early on that, okay, we don't have the rights to any of the leagues or clubs or tournaments. So we're going to turn the cameras away from the field and toward the stands. and really tell those stories, those off the field stories and those fan stories, the supporter stories, those culture stories that are unique to soccer. That's one of the things that makes our game so much different than the other sports in America is the level of depth that you can go into with these sort of fan culture around the game. It's COPA90's thing is really we call ourselves a fan first football media company. So there's kind of like a two sides of the house, if you will. And I say it's kind of like an iceberg because icebergs you only see about 30%, what's above the surface. The other 70% below the surface you never see. 30% that people see is our editorial output. And that's kind of what we made our name on, and that's what we made our bones on, going around the world and telling these great stories from
Hmm.
different clubs and supporter groups, and there's all these really great local true fan rooted stories from around the world. And a lot of these, great mini documentaries that you'll see started on YouTube, and now we're into vertical video things like Instagram and TikTok as well. The 70% that's under the surface is all of our sort of partnership work that we do. So we work with a lot of your favorite household brands in the sports world and outside of the sports world on their soccer marketing and storytelling. Um, that piece is sort of a little bit of a flywheel because that piece sort of allows us to do the other work. Because flying to Argentina and posting up there for a month comes at a cost. So we do the work that creates the opportunity for us to pay for those and fund those kind of fun things.
Yeah, yeah, and we're gonna keep most of this conversation on that 30%, the top of the iceberg here. Although maybe we can set up a round two to get a little bit deeper because
Another story for another time.
yeah, you're right. Being I would say similarly, a soccer storyteller and kind of this, legion of us on all these different platforms is we love doing this. It's our passion. Then how do you fund it? How do you sustain it? How do you keep it going is the big question here. But to get back to this top of the iceberg, let's talk about the best job in the world. It's a project you guys have having multiple creators, different. I would describe it, and I'll let you do it, but I would kind of describe it as a scene of like people who are kind of in these different worlds around the game, right? Who kind of have a certain perspective or an angle on what the game is and specifically what the World Cup is going to be. So tell us a little bit about that project and what do you think excites you about that as kind of being a, very novel idea within this soccer storytelling space in North America.
Yeah, sure. Best Job in the World started at the top of, I guess now last year, as we're doing this on the 2nd of January, but at the top of 2025. Basically, an open call for creators to submit to basically shoot their shot, right? At being the next sort of on-air talent, if you will, at COPA90. It was a competition that was done before, and the winner of that was Ellie Minjam, who has been with Copa90 now for about a decade, if I recall correctly, um, telling stories all over the world about every angle of football fandom. So we wanted to kind of run that one back and see who we could find, see what voices we could elevate ahead of this World Cup in 2026. I think we had around 3,500, 3,600 submissions. We're now down to the final five,
Hmm.
who all their content has started going out just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They're all live now in various stages on at Copa90. If you go to Instagram or TikTok, be sure and check those out. But five different creators who all come from different lanes. We've got uh, a young guy from Miami named Juan, who's a Colombian American, and he's kind of going around exploring different communities via football and how playing pickup helps people kind of stay connected to their country of origin. We've got a guy named Jay up in Toronto who's doing a similar thing over a meal. One of the things about immigration in this country, there's kind of this thought that people they'll move, they'll change their name, they'll change their religion, they'll change a lot about them, but two things they'll keep with them: their food and their
Mm.
football team. You know,
Mm.
so he's in Toronto, which is one of those great North American cities that's really like built on the back of immigrants, and talking to people over a meal in sort of their favorite restaurant from their sort of homeland about soccer and how it keeps them connected. Um, there's another great one that's really enjoyable. This woman Cheyenne, she's got this really crazy bus It's like this weird Japanese
Yeah, shout
bus
out to
that's like
Cheyenne.
a
I've been following Cheyenne for a while. Yeah, she go all over North
yeah,
America. It's
yeah.
an awesome bus to be fair. It's very
Yeah,
cool
this
and it's
van. It's a
powered
van.
by the
Yeah, it's
game.
got like a Toyota Hachi. It's like a right hand drive. You know,
Yeah.
does not belong on American roads. She's kind of like, Where's my next home? Where do I want to settle? You know, I'm kind of doing this nomadic thing, but make no mistake, I want to settle down somewhere that's got a club team, but I don't want to go somewhere obvious. So she's kind of going around the sort of USL level and just stopping in different cities and checking out the scene there and kind of rating them, you know, saying like, could I live here? Could I not live here? Based on the soccer culture and the team around them. And we've got a couple others. They're all really great. They're all covering different lanes, you know, and they all bring in new audiences. And I think for us, it's, you know, not only do we want to find, you know, and elevate and give a platform to these next voices, but we also want to sort of draw in new audiences, right? And everybody's got their own they've got their own team behind them, so to speak. They've got their own backers. So it's a really good way for us to put people on a bit of a pedestal, put them on a platform, but it's also a way to expose ourselves to other folks that may or may not be familiar with COPA90.
Yeah, I think that was something I wanted to ask you as well, is that another agency might have said, hey, who are kind of our biggest established people, you know, and the reach they're going to have when it comes to a community, and let's go with them and put our investment there. Whereas you guys have, I think, in general, selected creators who have a more like niche community, right? And maybe not the biggest when it comes to the numbers and metrics, but have a strong following. Like I mentioned, Cheyenne had been following for a few years, and it's a really fascinating picture on the game that she offers. But like, so what was kind of some of that like criteria then when you're going to say, hey, out of these 3,600, here's what we're looking for, and this is what ultimately relates to our ultimate goal with this project?
First and foremost is like, are they good on camera, right? It's kind of a non-starter if you're not good on camera, right? So that eliminated a lot of people, right? One of the other big things again was audience. What's their background? What community do they bring in? Are they bringing something new to the table that Copa 90 is not really hitting, right? Or are they bringing something new to the table that is maybe underrepresented, right? American soccer is a very funny place in the fact that it's so fragmented and so diverse. Are we creating an opportunity here where we can have a bunch of different voices from a bunch of different backgrounds come to the fore? Can we bring more women forward? Can we bring in more people of color? Can we bring in more LGBTQ voices into the mix? Right. That was something to consider. And then I'd say for me, the third thing to really consider was, you know, if they win, do they have the acumen to sort of bring stories to the fore and be able to tell stories as opposed to someone's like, hey, we've got this story, we've got a script, go read this in front of the camera, right? Don't get me wrong, there's a big difference in being a journalist who sits behind the desk on 10 o'clock news and reads a teleprompter versus being, you know, one of those old school Dan Rather journalists who's like finding the story and going out into the war zone to shoot it and cover it and interview the
Mm-hmm.
people themselves, right? There's kind of two different schools there. So with this, it was very much like we want the latter. We want those people who are kind of living this and are kind of like, hey, there's a really cool story going on, and you know, name your lower division city, Pittsburgh. You know, there's a really cool story with Pittsburgh where they've got this great riverfront stadium that they're about to expand to 15,000 people, and this is going to allow them to be in the conversation when USL goes into the promotion or relegation sort of journey that it's about to take.
Mm-hmm.
Right, someone who can identify those things, understand is there a story there, get to the point where say yes, I think so, and then go and actually have the wherewithal to sort of go out and produce and build and tell that story. We're really looking for people that can really go out and be that voice. I think Ellie's the best example of that. Ellie Benjamin is sort of the proof point of what a difference it can make when you have someone who is really invested and lives this thing, as opposed to someone who's just a great talking head on TV.
I think of our musical analogies, like you're looking for that singer songwriter versus just, you know, a vocal performance with a huge team of writers behind, or
Yeah,
ghostwriters, right?
yeah,
But that speaks to like not only a connection to the game, but also understanding what their communities want, right? Like it's they're emotionally invested, they're embedded, like they just kind of get it within that particular community.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's
And
about it's that thing of like you talked about it earlier, just like how we get to these people. The era of like, oh, let's work with this person because they have 8 million followers or whatever their
Hmm.
big number is
Hmm.
on Instagram. At this point, those are like vanity metrics, right? Because now we're in the age of the algorithm, and we know that just because you have 8 million followers, 8 million people don't see the content you put out,
Yeah.
right? So you can certainly make that play and go wide like that sort of mass market. The other way is to like go for people who have smaller followings, but followers that are much more engaged, So it's, do you want to go a mile wide and an inch deep, or would you rather go an inch wide but a mile deep? You know, I think we're ideally we're somewhere in between there, but I think to do that, you have to lean into that smaller, maybe smaller following creator, in a way that in the past would have been uncomfortable for people, because just the numbers wouldn't seem to have make sense. But the reality is, you can find people that have only 7, 8 thousand followers, but they've got 5,000 of those followers who are deeply engaged and
Hmm.
will, everything the creator does resonates with them and rings the bell. You have to lean into that to kind of find that middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, there's kind of some of those structural pieces that are making that possible now with the way that the different platforms are operating, right? Kind of the TikTokification, I've heard it called, right? With the way the algorithm is working. But this is all building towards the World Cup, right? So this whole project, all these stories, these little worlds. So what can we expect to see during the World Cup from these creators? And then how does that tie in to your and COPA90's larger vision of this massive cultural opportunity for soccer in North America?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a little bit of what I talked about earlier about community, man. It's like really like being able to get outside of the game, like the actual 90-minute game, and really go into everything else that's going on around it. There'll be 1,000 people, right? Fox and all the broadcasters and rights holders and the ESPNs of the world, they will be telling the story of this player's goal, this player's injury, this player's red card. They'll be telling that story ad nauseum. What they won't be telling the story of is, this group of guys who got together in, Branson, Missouri, or some random place to turn their town square into the local World Cup headquarters. You know, they won't be telling that story. And that's the story we want to tell. We want to tell the story of the group of Senegalese cab drivers in New York City who, because they're working and because they can't afford the extortionate price of the ticket to the France Senegal game, but they're all going to get together at some restaurant that, if you're not Senegalese, you don't know it exists. Those are the stories we want to tell. We want to get into the real sort of fan culture that's below the surface and really enable, I guess, really elevate those stories from the underground to the overground.
Yeah, obviously I'm biased, right? Because we are kind of on a very similar wavelength the way you look at the game, but those stories are like so much more fascinating to me and more engaging than, obviously we're hoping for some bangers. I've been saying for everybody when it talks to the impact of the tournament in the United States, we hope the national team does well, right? We're hoping for some epic legendary moments that we advance and drama and tension and things that bring people in, because I think there's an element of that is going to help the game grow more of this when we talk about a little bit more of this mainstream kind of thing, and we talk about brands increasingly coming to respect and value soccer and what it offers too, and putting kind of investment in that. But what you mentioned is some of those ideas, and similarly, I'm doing this series of road trip to the World Cup and trying to look at all levels of the game too. Obviously, being in the stadium is going to have its place, and if you can afford that or get a chance, like go for it, because those will still be very pivotal transformational moments for people. But really, it's going to be just especially in the United States, right? And in North America in general, obviously it's a teeny bit different country by country, but you're talking about
Hmm.
Toronto, the diversity there in so many cities in the United States. Like when I was in New York filming there, everybody's answer of what are you going to show the world? It's just going to be like the diversity. Like if you support Ecuador, there's going to be a place with like tons of Ecuadorians. If you support, Curacao might be a little bit of a reach, but I'm sure somewhere there's going to be some Curacao fans, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody in some way, we have a pocket in the United States somewhere. And seeing that come out with the music, with the food, with the energy, it's just like that party festival feeling. I always argue it's the, greatest cultural, not just sporting, but greatest cultural event we have on a global level.
Absolutely, absolutely, and not to bury the lead, right? In this moment that we're having culturally, politically in this country,
Hmm.
in some ways it's the worst time to have the World Cup here. In some ways, it's the best time to have the World Cup
Yeah.
because we need that counterbalance, right?
Hmm.
We need that counterbalance that celebrates all those things that America is, that diversity, that hope, that optimism of, because make no mistake, Curacao, no, they're not going to win the World Cup, but they want to, right? That until they are mathematically eliminated,
Hmm.
they will keep that hope in their hearts, and every team will, right? And that's what makes the World Cup so great. Like there's that positivity and that energy around it that we could use right now.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, as a culture, as a world, as a people.
100%. Yeah. And that's, again, I think a really pertinent point of how everybody connects together and how all these different little elements of our world are kind of clashing and influence each other. Again, that's kind of that global diverse nature what soccer offers that so many of us love it for. And so many, I think that people find that meaning and they find that connection to each other through a lot of these stories, right? And so I think that that's how people kind of can understand and have their minds or their values impact, with the kind of stories that they're exposed to, which I think is exciting. So I'm ready for it to kick off tomorrow. We got a couple months, which I'm kind of glad for because I feel like there's so much, that I want to be a part of, that I want to build. I'm sure that you guys are like, hey, it's almost there's not enough time. Are we doing enough to take advantage of this moment? That's kind of the questions going through my mind of really valuing it, hoping that everybody in their own little lanes and ways like can really just take advantage of this opportunity to the maximum level.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you almost can't believe. And again, 2026 is here now. We've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about it for so long, and now it's like, oh wow, it's here. It's not when 2026 comes anymore. It's here now, and it's one of those things where I've been kind of joking when, sure you have this, everyone has this. People see a friend you haven't seen in a couple weeks. Hey, what have you been up to? Yeah, how's work? And I tell people that, like, well, if you're a fan or a team, the World Cup is next summer. If you are a brand or a brand partner or anyone
Mm-hmm.
involved in kind of making the sausage, so to speak, that people
Mm-hmm.
will consume next summer, the World Cup's here now. You know, it's really, really ramped up in the sort of the behind the scenes world. But we're now in this point where, okay, these things we've been talking about doing, they're about to happen. They're really about to happen. And it's exciting, exciting. I think the other thing that's really exciting is like, okay, this is going to happen. And then next year, there's a Women's World Cup that's not in America, but make no mistake, America
Mm-hmm.
tunes in for the Women's World Cup and the women's national team in a way that
Absolutely.
probably outshines the men's national team to a degree. So that excitement will be there next year. And then the year after that, we'll have a repeat of that with the Olympics, which will be in Los Angeles in the States, and we'll have the men and women competing there. So as exciting as 2026 is, I'm already looking
It's
beyond that at
five
what
years, right? Now we've got 2031 World Cup, with the women. Yeah, it's just, I mean, and then 2030 is going to be epic because it's like 100-year anniversary of the World Cup, right? And you're
Yeah.
going to have it in 5 countries, and cross continental, 3 continents. It's kicking off the beginning of all of this. It's but
Yeah.
let's just kind of be present what we got here, right?
Yeah. I think, when I look at it here from a domestic POV, I look at it as the 2026 as sort of the midpoint pinnacle of a 5-year period. This moment really started a couple of years ago, with Copa America 2 summers ago, and then last summer Club World Cup. This summer, Men's World Cup. Next summer, again, that Women's World Cup's not going to be here, but make no mistake, what's not here physically will be here in terms of energy. And then the year after that, we've got the Olympics back here. So the way I look at it is there's this big domestic moment. We're in the middle of that, but this big domestic moment of 5 years is part of a longer, probably 7, 8, 9 year stretch. And I think, it's probably, I don't want to say probably, I will say this is definitely, I'm going to go on a limb, definitely the biggest energy point. This is an inflection point for the game in this country, right? If there's not a noticeable increase in interest, in investment, in love for soccer. At, this, at the end of this period, I don't know what to do. Quite
Yeah.
frankly, you know what I mean?
What's
Like,
going to do it, right? If this
yeah,
doesn't,
what's gonna
what
do it? Like,
would?
really?
Yeah.
And in the background of all that, right, Andrew, it's like there's all that tournament stuff, but in the background of that, you've got, the NWSL is flying right now. It's the investment that's being made in expansion teams, the investment that's being made in players, the attention the league is getting has never been higher. This is a small matter of we have Lionel Messi, the greatest to ever do it, playing in our men's domestic league here, right? We've got arguably the best player in Italy is an American kid from Hershey, New Jersey.
Pennsylvania.
There's
We got to, as
all
a Pennsylvania guy, I gotta
claim
correct you on this
claim
one. Hershey, Pennsylvania. Yeah. PA Classes guy.
what
Yeah.
did I say? Hershey what?
Yeah. Jersey. We can't give Jersey the
Sorry.
credit for Pulisic, okay?
Sorry, you're right.
Can't
You're
do
right.
it.
Well,
I'll give
that's a
Dortmund credit
reflex.
before I'll give Jersey credit
Sorry, you're right.
for Pulisic.
Hershey, Pennsylvania. I can't believe I said that. But you get what I'm saying, right? There's all these
Yep.
other things that are going on in the background that, these tournaments aren't operating in a vacuum. There's all this
Hmm.
other momentum that's going on, that point to this moment being this sort of like gasoline on the fire for the game in
Yeah.
this country.
And I think that's part of the exciting part of it is I've been traveling around really the country and the continent to an extent and asking people like what's your hope for like the legacy, that there have been a lot of different answers. 94 was obvious because it was like no league, right?
Mm,
That was a clear difference. So we look at a legacy of 1994 on a structural level. It's bringing the league in, and then like you shared with your personal experience, it was giving people that firsthand, whether they're in the stadium or watching it. It was like the game is on our doorstep. You have to pry your eyes open. You have to see this. Okay.
hmm
Now there, as you mentioned, there's all these different things, and I see trends even on amateur levels. Probably the only area of the game that I'm not like super gung ho on in America is probably the youth level, and you referred to the youth industrial complex before. But even within that, there's a slice of what I hope this tournament does is create more like access and make it more democratic, whether it's building more fields in neighborhoods, mini pitches, creating more like programs, getting more institutional funding behind programs that are just, not developing the next Pulisic, but just like we just want kids in this neighborhood to play soccer because we think it has positive outcomes and it's like you said, being on a team. That's the one area I think I'm excited about. But everything else, any professional level in the pyramid, USL announcing Pro Rel, there's a huge opportunity. We're going to see the devil in the details on that, but a huge opportunity there. Like there's just so many things happening. So I think that's kind of the beautiful part of it is that maybe we're not going to be able to look back on 2026 and say 2026 happened and then this happened. It's going to be like all these different areas. That's my hope at least.
Yeah, yeah. I think, sometimes the biggest impact doesn't make the loudest bang, you know? Sometimes it's like the things that really spark change aren't this huge mushroom cloud of a moment, Sometimes it's a ripple that goes wide, you know. And I think this might be that moment. I think this could be that moment because I think, with 94, yeah, that was a great way to put it, you had a clear cause and effect, sort of A happened, so B happened, but that was a very different time, you know. No social media at that time, no Reddit at that time. Again, the conversations about the game were very limited and very pocketed. So I think that was easier to see the impact in a moment like that. This moment, I think, you know, what you're talking about there about, yeah, maybe it's not about creating the next Pulisic. It's not about creating the next great American player, but maybe it's about creating the next great place for America to play,
Hmm.
right? This more fields, more leagues that aren't, $3,000 a year club teams, more opportunities for kids that aren't really exposed to the game to get exposed to the game, or crucially, more opportunities for kids who do have exposure to the game, have a love of the game, but may not have the financial situation that allows them
Hmm.
to play the game at some $3,000 a year club team, that those kids get those opportunities. I think that's because to me, that is what makes your next Pulisic, right? If I look at,
100%.
you know, I mean, look at pick your sport in America: football, basketball, hockey. Name it. There are kids that see that sport as their way out. In the rest of the world, kids see soccer as their way out. Kids in America don't see soccer as their way out. I don't think. Personally, I think soccer here gets viewed as this sort of middle class and up sport, and it's
Hmm.
not viewed as the working class sport as it is around the rest of the world. And I think the more opportunities we can make for working class kids to be able to play the game and express themselves on the pitch, we will be all the better and richer for it.
No, 100% agree with you there, Shawn. And speaking of kind of these players on the pitch, let's pivot here. Let's move on to our all-time five-a-side segment, right? So I'm
Mm.
curious to hear your team. Again, to remind everyone and to give you a refresher as well, really you're only picking four because you got to put yourself somewhere in that team.
Well, we're doomed right there. So I'll just have to
You're going to rally, though.
overcompensate.
I'm excited to see who's going to carry. So often with our guests, it's, who maybe we should call it, instead of the all-time five-a-side segment, it's the who's going to carry you segment, right? So you got
Mm.
you and then four players that could be an all-time legend, that we've already mentioned today in conversation, or it could be your buddy from that 6-year-old team in Texas. Like, really anybody you want. Keeper's optional. Hit us, Shawn, with your all-time five-a-side squad.
Obvious. I'm gonna go with Thierry Henry, right? That's my star. That's my
And you're a Red Bulls guy, New York Red Bulls guy. So of
Red
course
Bulls
there's a
guy. Even
connection.
beyond it, I mean, the guy's
Yeah.
just like you go back and watch like old YouTube videos of him, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's not even the skill, but it's like the panache that he plays with. There's
Grace.
like the grace, but also a cockiness that
Yeah.
in many other players would be like despicable, but for him, it just makes you love him more. I don't know why. Yeah, a bit of a Red Bulls guy. With that, I will pull Seth Stamler out of the hat. Seth
Okay.
Stamler was a
Educate
guy
me.
who yeah, Seth Stamler was kind of like tail into the Metro Stars era, bleeding into the Red Bulls era. And he was just total like, I would like to call him a journeyman. He's a journeyman type player, but he was a one club guy. He played 7, maybe 8 seasons with the Red Bulls. He was like a journeyman on the field. And what I mean by that is like, I think the guy literally played every position at some point except for goalkeeper. As a winger, you saw him play as a D mid. You saw him get forward in the attack. You saw him be deployed as a right back or a center back every once in a while. He was just like this utility guy. So I think in a five-a-side team, it's important to have this guy that you can just
Do a bit
kind
of
of stick
everything.
around
Yeah.
anywhere. But you also want to have your hard man. And for that, I'm gonna go with Captain Caveman himself, Carlos Puyol. That guy just ruthless,
Mm.
just ruthless. I was at a celebrity game in Miami. Gosh, this is probably almost 10 years ago. They did El Clasico in Miami. I don't know if you remember this, probably 8 or 9 years ago, maybe. They did El Clasico in Miami for the first time. But ahead of that, there were all kinds of, shout out to the promoters of this because they made this friendly feel like it was a Super Bowl. I mean, there was 4 days of events like concerts by like Drake and DJ Khaled and all these guys, and there was a celebrity game, but then there was this Barca versus Real Madrid Legends game. And Carlos Puyol treated this like it was a cup final. I mean, these guys were all like, 45, 55 years
Mm-hmm.
old, and he was out there like two-footing guys. I mean, just absolutely ruthless and uncalled for. But you gotta have that guy. And then my fourth man, oh my gosh, the fourth man is always a tough one. Um, but I'm actually not going to go with a man. I'm actually going to go with a woman, and I'm going to go with Carly Lloyd, just because Carly Lloyd is just like the most all business person
Mm.
on the field there ever was. Maybe to the point of being slightly robotic in her personality. But Carly Lloyd is just all business, like no BSing, there's no showboating, but completely skillful. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like love,
The one who's going to score goals and yeah, like be on kind of
yeah,
both ends.
yeah,
Yeah.
but just but at the same time, just like tough as rocks. That's my
Awesome.
team.
Sounds like
I
a
don't know how
fun.
well we'll do in the season, but they've got to all hold me up and carry me.
Yeah, got it. Got a lot of character on that team. A nice mix too of kind of the personal connections and then all-time legend. So love that. And then final piece here, final question, Shawn. Coming back to kind of the values we've been talking about and what's driven our podcast, a lot of our video storytelling and our conversation today is could you complete the sentence because football?
Because football, because football is what makes Saturday mornings tolerable. I don't know. Maybe tolerable is not the word, but it makes Saturday morning like interesting. I'm an old married guy, so like when Saturday morning comes, it's like, okay, let's
Mm.
do all the things I didn't get to do during the week when I was at work. I gotta
It
go to Home
allows you to
Depot. I
push off
gotta,
the Home Depot run. That's exactly what I was gonna
yeah,
say. Yeah.
yeah. It just gives me something on Saturday morning to just like, all right, let's ease into the week and let me have a little taste of relaxation before I get into all my Saturday things that I do before I do it again at night. Because I'm like the beauty of if you're, American soccer is again, it's so fragmented. There are a lot of people who only watch MLS or they only watch the EPL or they only watch whatever. I love the fact that it's like one of those things where I can watch my EPL games in the morning, go do all my Saturday family man stuff, and then Saturday night I can go watch the MLS team, So it's like one layer of the sandwich. It's the bottom
Yeah.
bread
All
of the
encompassing. Yeah.
sandwich.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
whole day. Yeah. No,
Yeah. But it's
100%.
because football Saturday morning is not a chore.
Yeah, 2 foot literally there. Yeah, yeah, no, awesome. Something I look forward to, right? Of like seeing my team. Hey, who do we got? No matter how dreadful or tough a season it might be, yeah, it gives you something to look forward to with your coffee. But brilliant, man, Shawn, amazing. Obviously, we're gonna put the links in the description for COPA90 and best job in the world, and I'll let everybody kind of navigate the different platforms to find those creators. But if people want to get in touch or connect with you directly, what's a good way to do that?
You can catch me on Instagram at the Offside Rules.
Cool. So we've got that link to everybody. For everybody listening and watching, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate this. Hopefully, this conversation, whether it's our in real life events around the World Cup or it's something with the storytelling or culture, again, I think the beautiful thing about this game is it's massive and you can make it your own in your own backyard in so many ways. So hopefully, it moves you guys to doing that. And Shawn, thank you for being with us. This is amazing.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one, man.
Cool. All right. Thank you. See you guys on the next episode. Peace.